Oh, you guys are so funny. So today is May the 19th. I am so glad that you guys are here. The world continues to ebb and flow and do its thing, and it really truly is remarkable experiencing what is happening in the world right now, especially from this new space that I'm in, this new identity that I have as grandmother. And it really, oh my goodness, it puts so many things in into clearer perspective, which is helping me become even more clear, not only of my role in the ascension process right now, but in who I want to teach and what it is that I want to communicate. Because it's one thing to talk about that this is all an illusion, that we're all pure consciousness, that everything is pure energy. It's another one to live embodying that as our truth. And the Course in Miracles, to me, has helped me gain the distinction in a very, very clear way of what the difference is between talking about it and walking it. And we have examples of beings who have walked this planet where they walk the talk. And we love those beings. You know, we talk about them all the time. The three that we will,
I
that,
was looking.
oh, let me mute everybody. Let's see. Those three, I'm just going to mute everybody here. The three people that we always talk about and everybody is so familiar with are Jesus, Martin Luther King Jr., and Gandhi. I mean, we talk about them and quote them and put their cards up in our social media, share their quotes in our newsletters, and walk around talking about these things as if, yeah, that's the truth, and these are the people that we so appreciate what they've taught us. But are we walking it? And if they could do it, so can we, because there is absolutely no difference between any of us. For me, it's really clear. The only difference that Jesus says exists between him and any one of us who's a student of the Course or a student of truth is whether we know the truth or not, or how much of the truth do we know or don't know. So that's the only difference, is how much of the truth do we know and embody and live by. So in the Course in Miracles, Jesus is so consistent. I am just like you. See me as your brother, maybe your older brother. See me as your friend, but I have nothing more special than you do. I am exactly like you. I am an idea in the mind of God, which is what the Course says every one of us is. God imagined us. And when we were imagined to extend love. All of us, ideas in the mind of God, designed to extend love in any dimension that we want to experience. When we choose to experience anything lower than the fourth dimension, we begin to have to believe that we're other than what we are, because that is the place where we suppress the truth of who we are to have an experience as other than. That's all that the 3D world is all about, the world of four dimensions. Because when we enter into solidity, we enter into the belief in space and time, we are literally pretending to be what we're not, because what we are is timeless, is eternal, is pure non-physicalness, and it doesn't take up space. It is space itself. So when the mind gets clear, oh yeah, I'm energy, but you are worried about, catching the virus or catching a cold or catching cancer or getting hit by a train, you cannot in that moment of fear and worry know what you are. Because if you knew what you are, none of those things would cause fear or worry, because you would know those are just experiences that we are having in the mind of God. So it gets really tricky to shift allegiance to what it is that becomes our truth and our ultimate reality. And that shift in perception is what the Course in Miracles calls a miracle. When you shift your perception and can operate in the paradox that you are non-physical, having a physical experience, now there's no need for fear. Where would fear show up when you know that what you are is non-physical? The work becomes experiencing the physicality without guilt, without shame, without fear, without anger, and being present to what is happening as Jesus demonstrated for us on the cross. You can have nails run through your hand, but that's not where your focus is. Your attention is not, oh my God, they're hurting my body. Gandhi was shot. He was not concerned about physical harm to him. He knew he was standing for the liberation, the sovereignty of the Indian people. Martin Luther King Jr. knew full well that his life was in danger because he was the anti-establishment. He was going completely against what those in positions of power wanted to do. He knew he was going up against those who could get rid of him in an instant, and they did. In an instant, they got rid of him. So how do these people continue to do their work, continue to teach about love till the very last breath that they take? Well, it's because they shifted their perception. They knew they were in the world, but not of it. So their knowingness of the truth of who they are in full alignment with that truth allowed them to become these amazing teachers. And I believe that the Course in Miracles, in giving us the understanding of what forgiveness is all about, we are being given the recipe, if you will, for how to make that shift from our mind seeing the external world as real to the total recognition that we have projected it out to have an experience. And the only way that external experience can change is if we have an internal shift, a shift of perception internally. So the fifth dimension, which Eckhart Tolle wrote about a new earth, this new earth that is the possibility for us to experience, we have to build it. And believe me, they will come. And how do you build that 5D world? Is through a consciousness. It's not like we're going to go build 5D buildings, because in 5D you don't need buildings. You don't go build them. Imagination is what takes over again. Everything emanates from consciousness, because you know you are the creator of your reality. You choose what you want to project externally. Now, I am also very clear that the fifth dimension is a world that is going to be experienced by beings who are of a consciousness very much like Jesus had, knowing that, especially after when he resuscitated, when he reappeared in the world in a body that was not solid, that is the fifth dimension. So we are not going to create a new earth, fifth dimension world right now, because our consciousness is not there yet. We are moving in that direction, and to move in the direction of creating that new earth, we have got to clean up our thought system. We've got to internally begin to realize and embody that we are powerful creators, and anything outside that we do not like, we have got to focus on what is it that we want instead. The Course is so simple. Shift in perception is a miracle. What do we want to perceive as our reality is what we're here to do. So to perceive a reality out there that is what we want, we cannot continue to look at what is outside as having power over us. And this is really, truly the work of forgiveness, as taught by the Course in Miracles, which is we're forgiving ourselves for ever forgetting that we are the powerful beings that we are. So when we see something that we don't like outside, we have to acknowledge that we created it. And this is very challenging. And I've noticed this, especially with spiritual people. We get all high and light and kumbaya and unicorns and butterflies. And we do not want to look at what is dark. We do not want to acknowledge that we have participated in the creation of that because we are just too love and light. And that spiritual bypass is the ego convincing us to stay on the love and light side, all the while it continues to project its our own disowned guilt, our own disowned shame and fears and everything that is dark inside of us. So until we forgive ourselves for having created everything that we don't like on the outside, we cannot make peace with it. And by peace, it doesn't mean that we're saying, oh yeah, killing babies is okay. I'm at peace with that. What that means is that we acknowledge that that behavior externally could never have happened without our tolerating it. And that's the recognition of how powerful we are. That the world of everything that we don't like was created because we have given it permission to be reality. And part of what has happened, especially to the Western world, is our minds have been so distracted from realizing how powerful we are that, you know, every time we watch a movie of murder, of rape, of, you know, warring, we fill our mind with that all of those things hurting others are okay. So what is it that we need to do? We need to, number one, really truly stop watching those things if you are feeling entertained by it. Watch them if you're prepared to do a major energy session or healing session, which is you watch that and you observe the pain and suffering that before entertained us. Now recognize we don't want to participate in that anymore. That is no longer what I want in my reality. Because we have been fed entertainment of suffering of others, we have got to correct in our mind that we have participated in that. We have contributed money to those movies. We have bought the popcorn while we were sitting in the movie theater. We have participated in watching those stories, and maybe at home we go, oh, what a horrible thing that happened to that family. Then we go about our business and do whatever entertains us, go to the mall. Well, you know, I know many haven't been to the mall in a year, but our minds have been desensitized to the suffering in humanity, which has made us inhumane. And we have got to resensitize ourselves by recognizing that in oneness, what one feels is part of the wholeness. It's part of everything that we are. And again, it is not to see what is happening after we forgive ourselves and go, okay, now I'm going to ignore it. It's to be open to receiving the guidance that allows us to be part of the correction while in physical form. As Martin Luther King was part of the correction, part of what began the process of changing what was absolutely not acceptable. Gandhi did it. Every single one of us can be used by infinite intelligence to affect correction in a very unique way. And it's going to look different for everybody. For some, it will look like taking up arms. For some, it will look like going into politics. For some, it will look like just staying home and nursing your baby. It doesn't matter how we do it. What matters is that our consciousness needs to be set straight in alignment with only the laws of God, which we've talked about in one of our previous conversations. But today, what I really want to focus is understanding what forgiveness is all about. Because forgiveness is really, to me, it's about as honest as we can get with ourselves and acknowledging how powerful we are, because we're looking at what is happening in the world that we do not like in ourselves and in others. And we are acknowledging that it has happened because we forgot who we are. And when we know that we're powerful creators, in honesty, you have to realize that any suffering externally is it's a direct projection of something internally that still has not been healed. And these are big, high, lofty concepts, but if we don't live into them, if we don't give ourselves permission to acknowledge that power, we really get stuck seeing this external world and giving it power. Our kids will have power over us when they get mad at us. Our spouses, our government, our vaccine will have power over us. So let me stop there and let me get any feedback and any questions, comments around this.
I have a question. This is Jody.
Hey, Jody.
Hey there. I'm for some reason not getting the part that I projected. So let's say, and this is true statement, I drive by this little farm like every day, and there's chickens in there and they're treated horribly. So I created that. Can you help me out with that one? That's just kind of, how did I create their suffering?
So when we're doing this work, the ego mind, it tries to understand this, and it wants to pinpoint things. How did I create the suffering of that chicken or those chickens or that particular community or that particular country? We've got to move beyond the external form and just go to the suffering that is experienced. So when you see those chickens and you can acknowledge that there's suffering happening, forget the form of the chicken and let's go to the content. And the course is really, really clear. Our ability to awaken has to do with understanding content. That's what we're shifting, is the content, not the form. So the physical form is a distraction that the ego is going to use. Let's go directly to the content. And this is something that every single one of us can do easily if you train your mind to feel. Then again, we got to become resensitized. So feel, what is it that you believe is the source of suffering that they're experiencing? Jody. Jody, still with us?
Oh, sorry, it untapped. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, so did you hear my question?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so go to the source of suffering. What is it that you feel is the suffering?
I feel that they're in pain and they have no space and they're trapped.
Okay, so for something to be trapped, there has to be a something trapping them and a being trapped. So now we get into victim and bully.
Yeah.
So I want you to, I know you're going to have to use your head for this, but I want you to feel in your heart, inside of your heart, in your feeling space. And again, you have to use your intelligence, but this is your spiritual intelligence to move above what the ego wants you to be focused on. Is it possible that in pure consciousness, there could be anything that is a bully and anything that is a victim?
No.
Why not? And keep it in simple words. Why not?
Because we are not bodies. We are eternal. We're energy. We're all just energy dancing.
Okay. So
we're eternal beings.
So from that perspective, you know that there is really no possible way for suffering to happen, because there could not be an oppressor and an oppressed. So now with that awareness, feel inside of you. And again, you have to use the feeling part and use your intelligence as well. We got to use both together. For that to happen, what must have you chosen in order to experience that?
I'm sorry, ask the question again.
For the oppressor and the oppressed experience to happen, what must you have chosen?
I must have chosen victim and bully.
So you must have chosen a consciousness that believes that that's possible.
Correct.
Okay, so you have a mind that can think. You can imagine. This is why we were made in the image of God, in the image of a creator. We can create whatever it is that we imagine. So I want you to, from a place of honesty, if you had not chosen to experience separation, could it be possible that you would experience victim and bullying, the suffering that comes from victims and bullies?
No, not if I didn't choose separation.
Okay. So again, we have to go through these mental exercises because we have to understand that the experience of separation is a choice that every single one of us has made, including that chicken, including, the chicken coop. Everything is consciousness expressing itself. So now let me ask you, if you know that in consciousness that's not possible, but in separation it is, feel inside of you and feel, have you participated in the being victimized with another who was your oppressor?
Yes.
Okay. Have you then participated in being the oppressor to a victim?
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Now, and here's total integrity. This is where the integrity is so key. Honesty, which is one of the characteristics of a teacher of God. In complete honesty. Isn't that a regular part of your reality? Hasn't it been a regular part of your reality where somebody has power and somebody doesn't?
Yeah, absolutely.
When we participate in separation, we agree to the potential of suffering. So the mind that got trained, especially you as a child, and again, I'm watching it with my grandson, it's what I want to be mindful of. As children, we got conditioned into some people have power and some don't. Child doesn't, parents do. That gets reinforced through the school system. It gets reinforced through the career, through the government. I mean, it just gets reinforced. It gets projected out there in such a massive way where everything has hierarchy. The ones at the top with the power, the ones at the bottom without it. So as you see those chicken and you notice the suffering, your greatest gift that you can give is to acknowledge that you have contributed through your choice to feel separation to the co-creation. It's a co-creation for all of this to become an experienced reality. And in your mind, you have got to see those chickens. And I mean, and this sounds crazy, but we have to do this. You've got to see them as powerful as you who chose to have that experience. Because if you see them as a victim, you are perpetuating the story of victim and bully in your mind. So you keep it active through your belief that there is something external that has no power.
Oh, that makes sense. I still want to go save all the chickens, but that does make sense.
And you can save the chickens. You can absolutely do that. We can save the whole world first by what the Course calls, our brother's salvation is our job. So the salvation of everything in the world is our job, because and salvation means spare them from our misperception. We have to stop believing that there's anything external that is powerless, because that is a projection of our own unhealed sense of victimhood. So when
it perpetuates it.
Totally, it perpetuates it.
I never really made that connection.
It perpetuates it because that, the reason Martin Luther King Jr. was standing for that we are all equal. He was very clear that only love, only light can eradicate the darkness. Only love can eradicate the hate, because we cannot hate our way into unity. We have to love our way into unity. And how do you begin the process of loving your way into unity? Open up your heart and start loving. When we see victims, we feel sorry for them. That's not love. That's ego. That is pure egoic, conditional love. If you were free, then I could love you. If you were free, then I could love the people who are, the I don't know what you call the masters of the chicken coop. So we have got to get straight that everything is pure consciousness. Everything is equally as powerful. And from that place, we forgive ourselves for entering into the illusion, the delusion of separation that causes suffering, and begin to see all beings as powerful. Because that is when then we can say, hey, because I love you, I want you to be free. Because I love you, because you are one with me, we're the same consciousness. My freedom is in freeing you from my judgment. And when I see you as powerful, now you will be more apt to do something about it that doesn't add to the separation, but rather adds to the unification. And that is what we as a collective have to do. We cannot fight our way into correcting what is not working. We have to get ourselves in alignment internally and then say, God, what would you have me do? Wait for the inspiration that will guide you to do something about that. I don't know how God is going to use you to help the chickens. You don't either, until you sit in stillness and hear the guidance. And again,
well, it's interesting because I just have to share this. It's almost like I'm really supposed to get this lesson because I drive by it and it's got these large cylinder, these like smokehouse things. And I was driving with Gerard's one day and he goes, oh, he just said it matter of factly. He's like, oh, that's where they kill the chickens. And I'm like, oh, I didn't need to know that. So it's interesting that I'm grateful that this came out right now. So thank you.
well, and and when you say you didn't need to know that, that in part is why so much of the suffering happens, is because most of us don't want to know that there is suffering happening in the world. And there has to be a heightened consciousness of the suffering that is happening for us to be able to really resensitize ourselves to the acknowledgement that it's not okay. So all of us operating inside of the story that, oh yeah, there are chickens who get killed over here, or cows that get killed over there, and it brings us our food to the table, and we don't want to know, we don't want to get our mind all messed up with knowing how they get slaughtered or how that happens, is part of the desensitizing of ourselves of what is taking place in the world. I grew up in the Dominican Republic. My grandparents had a farm. Both my grandfather and grandmother, they were divorced. From the moment that I was born, they were divorced. They had two farms, and both of them pretty much ran their farms just about the same way. They were primarily cattle farms, but they used to slaughter the calves and the pigs because that's how we got the meat and the chickens. And I grew up watching them slaughter those animals, and it was typically one at a time, and it was quick, it was done. And we used to laugh and play right around where they were killing these animals in the backyard of actually in the backyard of my grandmother's house. My grandfather's farm, his house was on the farm, so they did the slaughtering on the farm side. But in the very backyard of my grandmother's house, right next to the pool where we used to play, that's where they used to slaughter the animals. But never did I ever witness abuse in a way that was like some of the movies that I've watched about the way animals are slaughtered today. There was a reverence. There was a respect for the life that animal was giving, very much the way indigenous people would do. When there would be an animal that was going to be slaughtered, there was a gratitude for what that animal, that the life that animal was giving up. Its role was to provide, whether it was the skin for the warmth, whether it was the meat for the food, whether it was the bones for weapons, or whatever it was for self-protection, or whatever it might be. There was a oneness with all that is operating in their individualized roles for a reason, for an experience of 3D life. What has happened to us is that humans who have taken this 3D experience and decided that I get to be the boss of you and I get to be the one who decides what happens to you, created a hierarchy where some went to the top to decide what happens to everybody else. That is what is not okay. The experience of separation is absolutely what we're here to do, but we're here to extend love, not withhold it. And when we go into hierarchy, it is a withholding of love, because it says, only these deserve the best, these don't. So we have a lot of work to do to resensitize ourselves to the suffering of other beings, to correct the way that we've been doing things, and to reclaim the sovereignty of every single one, including the animals. So there's a lot of work that has to be done. So when we come to these conversations and we gather in groups like this, is to remind ourselves of our oneness, of the fact that each and every one of us is an idea in the mind of God that is wanted. If God didn't want us here and it stopped thinking about us, we would cease to exist. But what God creates, it creates eternally. Our work is to preserve in this 3D world, in other dimensions, we don't have to do this, because in other dimensions, higher dimensions, we operate from love. It is only from the 4th dimension and lower that we operate with fear, because of the idea that physical differences separate us. Physical differences are opportunities for us to connect just in a different way, to connect from a physical sense of separation, but not from a sense of superiorness, victims and bullies. That is what we are correcting in our mind. So thanks for that question, Jody. And these are the things that we've got to wrap our minds around. Well, if we're really energy, is that chicken suffering? Well, in consciousness, no, it's not. It is having an experience. But in physical, the physical experience, is the chicken suffering? Yes. Who's contributing to that? I am, because I allow suffering to be a reality. Now, each of us is not to take on the guilt of the world suffering. We are to correct our perception of anybody being a victim, of anybody having power over us, and from that sense of equality, move into the world to bring about correction as we are inspired to do, not because it's a victim, the chicken, but because it's equal. It's equal to me. That chicken shouldn't suffer no more than the person who is doing the killing of the chicken should do. Now, there are so many levels to this, and the Course wants us to not look at levels, but it also teaches us that our mind has been splintered in so many different levels that we've got to get our mind brought into unity first. But when you look at all of these levels, let's just use the chicken example. There are so many aspects of that are going to be impacted with a shift in perception. So for example, there are people who grow up on chicken. My kids grew up on chicken fingers. I mean, that's just the way that it was. So you've got people who expect that chicken to be on their, favorite menu at the restaurant. You've got the people who work at the restaurant who expect that chicken because they make their money from cooking that chicken and selling it. You've got the people who transport the chicken. You've got the people who raise the chicken, the slaughter the chicken, the company who owns that chicken farmhouse. In Georgia, we've got it's a big chicken country. The family, the Purdue family, they're big politicians in Georgia. Why do you think they're politicians in Georgia when they also own the chicken companies? Because they make sure that those chicken companies get all kinds of provisions so that chickens pollute. They create waste. Where does that waste go? It gets dumped into the water. What happens to that water? That goes downstream, it goes into the lakes, it goes into the drinking that we have. Why does Mr. Purdue enter into politics? Well, he wants to make sure that his company doesn't get penalized. There are so many aspects of every single thing when you begin to look at suffering. If you stay at what is superficial in the form, you're not going to go to the content of all of it. We have all been conditioned that it is okay to have our food fast and easy. that it is okay to have it cheap, that it is okay to fill these animals with incredible hormones that bloat them, that to the point that some of these chickens cannot even walk because their bodies have been made so big because they get more meat, you know, by the pound. And of course, the bigger they are, the more money they make. And who is watching the chickens? Who cares about the chickens? Is there anybody out there who is an animal advocate? Maybe there are. Do they get an opportunity to really speak on behalf of these animals? Probably not a whole lot. Why? Because the lobby for the chicken is a lot bigger than the lobby for humane treatment of the chickens. So there are so many things in this world that are intertwined. So if you look at that whole saving the chicken thing, you are literally going to be going up against the big corporations that own the chicken farms. You're going to be going against the politicians who get paid, who get money from the big corporations that own the chicken farms, that allow for some of these things to continue. It is so intertwined. It is so all enmeshed, and our minds have to get clear that we have to feel the suffering of those animals, but also the human suffering, because a lot of people would suffer if they lost their jobs, if they lost the ability to deal with killing the chickens. How are they going to feed their families? How are these poor workers, so many of them illegal in Georgia, that come in and do the work at the chicken coops, because your average American person doesn't want to go get their hands dirty killing chickens all day long, cutting up meat and dealing with blood. So we've got a lot of poor Hispanic people that work in these places. If we close down the chicken coop, how are they going to feed their families? Can you imagine the suffering of a family who loses their income? We are so interconnected that we have to take first a stand for the incredible power of a creative mind that has created so many potentials. And our work is first and foremost to align with the laws of God's internally, and then to make ourselves available to God. How would you have me, what would you have me do, so that we can move with gentleness and kindness into the world to bring about correction. So I know, Jody, you actually opened the door for a wonderful opportunity to look at how absolutely interconnected and intertwined this whole web of egoic deceit is. Yes, Vern. Let's see. Unmute yourself.
Yeah, Jody, I really appreciate what you said, because it's a metaphor for everything. It just happens to be chickens that we're focused on. But when we're having so many things happening now where somebody is being hurt physically by somebody else, by a group or by somebody, and people stand around and watch, and they videotape it. They don't step in to stop what's going on. We become so desensitized that we no longer feel that we should do something when we see that going on, even with human beings, not just with animals, but with human beings. And this is happening constantly. And I think as part of the metaphor for me, where I've come to is, yes, if I perceive that going on, it's definitely because I'm recognizing something in myself that's happening as well. So the gift of that, of the experience in that moment, is for me to become aware of areas that I need to address inside myself. In other words, this is a learning experience, and I have to understand that at a specific level. Now, once I understand that, then I have to remember that I'm perceiving the experience through my core beliefs. And if my core beliefs were different, I would definitely experience what I'm seeing differently. But once it gets to that point, and I call it like a Fruit Loop, once you've gone through that and recognized, okay, this is because I have a core belief around this. This is what I'm feeling, and feeling is part of it, because I'm learning, if you act on pure emotion and feelings when you first perceive, you're in trouble. You should feel what's going on, so you go to a level of higher understanding, of higher understanding. But if you react to what you're perceiving, then you're reacting to what's going on inside of you and not what the actual experience is. Because we all know if 10 people see the same thing, depending on their core beliefs, they're going to see it differently. And everybody would probably interact differently in the situation. But for me, where I'm at right now, because, you know, most of you know that I'm calling myself a conscious patriot now. I would before say I was a patriot, just a pure patriot. But by recognizing that I'm conscious, that's where I have to come from. So my actions of the perceptions that I'm hearing is so it's so important that my next best action. How do I interact with now that I recognize what's going on? What do I do next? If I don't go through that process, then I'm going to react instead of respond. And if I can respond what's going on with the chickens, I can say to myself, well, do you eat chicken? Stop eating chicken. I mean, that's something I could do myself. But if we don't take the time to get clear about what, and by the way, if we don't take action, I believe, that's my personal beliefs right now that I'm dealing with. If I see somebody hurt, I mean, you don't mess with animals, you don't mess with little kids, you don't mess with old people around me. Do not mess with them around me, because you're going to get a one-on-one motivational seminar that you do not want to have. Now, can I come from a different position? Instead of striking out at what I'm seeing, what can I do to move towards healing what I'm seeing? And at the same time, move into a physical protectiveness versus a different. And that's, you know, I think it's so important, because there are people, and I can't believe what I'm experiencing. I'm seeing all of these people, seeing people being hurt, you know, being beat up, all this stuff going on, and people just standing around. And I'm saying to myself, how can you stand there and watch that? Now, I have to stop for a second. Well, how many times have you seen things going on that you weren't concerned about, but they still were hurting other people or other things? So here we go back again. You come back with it, comes back to you for you to get the lesson. But for me, I know now that I have got to bring consciousness in to my patriotism. I've got to address the challenge from the highest level of response that I possibly can. But I do believe that I do need to stand up. I do believe that I have an obligation to stand up for anything that's being harmed or damaged that comes from a low level of understanding. So yeah. That's my
beautiful. That is, you know, if we look at the chart, and I've got it, let me see if I can pull it up. When we look at the map of consciousness and we recognize that there are stages that we're going to have to work through, there is absolutely no way somebody is going to jump at a higher level of consciousness that hasn't done the work of let's see, I've got it over here. Let me see if you can you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
I can.
So everybody else can see it? Yeah. So we all descend our consciousness literally from pure consciousness, knowing we're one with all that is, we literally descend. Humanity gets trained. I'm watching with this little one. It's going to happen. He is going to be trained into believing he's separate, believing he's got to listen to authority. And even though he's got really more conscious parents than the average person, it is going to happen. He is going to eventually be brought down into the places of lower consciousness. He may not necessarily go down to the evil sides. I don't know what his soul agreement is, but everybody gets trained out of our awareness that each and every one of us is sovereign. So we have to understand that. It happens to everybody that's part of being in the 3D world. When you can really truly recognize that that is why we are incarnated in 3D consciousness is so we can descend. Then we have to recognize that everybody is at some level on this journey. And we have to see everybody as a sovereign being, including the chicken who is going through the experience that they're going through, because nobody is where they don't want to be from a pure consciousness perspective.
Including a question, including the children that are
everybody.
Okay.
Yeah. So our work is, as we are awakening, is number one, to recognize that we are all sovereign beings with free will to choose to be somewhere where suffering is happening. We don't know the karma that everybody's working out. So that's why the Course tells us we cannot be judging anybody else. It is absolutely deceitful for us to think that we know what is best for anybody else. At the same time, this is why we have to accept paradoxes. While at the same time, we are recognizing that everybody appears to be separate and chose karmically where they are. At the same time, and this is where you know somebody who's awake lives in the paradox of in the world but not of it, of physical and non-physical, of yes, everybody is living out their own karma, they are sovereign beings, and yes, we are one consciousness that is assisting each other in the awakening process. So once you live in the paradox, that's when you're awake. Before that, you're at some level of awareness. To be fully awake to the suffering of another is to recognize that that sovereign being is asking for love. It's a call for love. It is a request. Please remind me of my sovereignty. I need to be reminded of my value, my worth, so that I can begin the process of ascension. Now, this is where also we have to understand that if somebody does not want to be helped, they do not want to be helped. But when we are dealing with those beings that in this incarnation, in this physical incarnation, as Vern was saying, you're a child, you're an animal, you're an elderly person who is no longer, in all of your faculties. You're a child that doesn't have maturity. You're an animal that is, yes, you have a karmic contract to come in and be an animal and possibly to be abused, but you still have a karmic, though it's beyond karmic, you still have a connection and oneness as a being that is offering an opportunity with a call for love because we're here to help one another. How would a being that is ascended and knows that they are love experience that love except through extending it to one who is calling for love? And again, if somebody does not want the help, they will let you know. They will tell you, you get out of my business. It's none of your business that I'm being beaten. I like being beaten, get away. But what you will notice 99.9% of the time, nobody who is suffering wants to remain there. They have a karmic contract to experience suffering because they are coming into a world of beings who are already awake and aware at different levels that are extending love, because we ascend through helping those who are in lower experiences. That is how we ascend. We literally are pushed up by those who give us an opportunity to see what love does, what real love is. And nobody can move up unless we have those who are giving us the opportunities for us to practice. Where does acceptance come from? Is acceptance of those who are in lower consciousness. Where does forgiveness come from? Is forgiveness of those in lower consciousness. So in the world of physicality of form, and we have ego, and there is victims and bullies, we are going to have to forgive not only when we have been a victim, which is why I was asking you that, Jody. We have been the victim and we have been the oppressor. The forgiveness is forgive ourselves for having forgotten that we contributed to that energy. And when we ascend to a place of awareness that we don't want to play in that anymore, The harmony that we feel in our heart is a harmony to connect with the heart of those who appear to be suffering, not to see them as a victim, but to extend from one sovereign being to another the right that they deserve, to be given the opportunity to say, do you want to keep suffering or not? And that is something that we have got to really understand. Assisting another is not to go save a victim. Assisting another is to assist a sovereign being that in a moment of incarnation has forgotten the truth of who they are. How are they going to remember it if we don't remember it for them? So in essence, we are our brother's keepers, and our Course in Miracles is really clear. We assist them by seeing them as a child of God, not an egoic victim. So that's part of what this journey of forgiveness is all about, which is completely not what the Course or what the world teaches us. So we are forgiving ourselves for having forgotten that we are bringers of love and light. We fell into the illusion. Now that we are ascending and we can see more clearly, we want to assist anybody who is calling for love, calling for help. And it is clear that many are asking for help in different ways. And it is ours to hear the way that we are here to be of service. Let me share from this particular lesson. It's lesson 134. And this lesson in the workbook for students, the title of it is Let Me Perceive Forgiveness as It Is. Let me perceive forgiveness as it is. Because the Course wants us to enter into a very radical understanding of forgiveness, which is why our wonderful friend, many of us knew before he passed, Colin Tippin wrote a book called Radical Forgiveness. It is based on the Course in Miracles principles of forgiveness. So let me read paragraph number 1. Let us review the meaning of forgive, for it is apt to be distorted and to be perceived as something that entails an unfair sacrifice of righteous wrath, a gift unjustified and undeserved, and a complete denial of the truth. In such a view, forgiveness must be seen as mere eccentric folly, and this course appears to wrest salvation on a whim. What Jesus wants us to understand there is that the world believes, oh yeah, I'm going to forgive you, but I'm not going to forget. I am the judge sitting on the superior court, and I get to decide that you are guilty or not guilty. That's not the kind of forgiveness that the Course wants us to understand, because that is a forgiveness based on hierarchy. One with power forgives that lowly one that made a mistake, and well, I'm going to forgive you, poor little person. Paragraph 2 says, this twisted view of what forgiveness means, according to the ego world, is easily corrected when you can accept the fact that pardon is not asked for, what is true. When we understand what is true, really there is no need for pardon, because God has created every one of us equally, totally, completely, equally as powerful. And we're learning of our power here. So we have to correct our mind from the illusion of some have power and some don't, of bullies and victims, of judges that know, what is right, and those who are the people who are going to get sent to jail or going to get punished. We've got to understand the truth that is taking place here. So let me read this sentence again, this part. When you can accept the fact that pardon is not asked for when something is true. Let me keep going so we can expand on this. It is irrelevant to everything except to illusion. Only in illusions do we need to pardon things that are not true. Truth is God's creation, and to pardon that is meaningless. So we're not here to give pardon to one another. God already created us free. Everybody is doing exactly what they want to be doing karmically. All truth belongs to him, to God, reflects his laws, and radiates his love. Does this need pardon? How can you forgive the sinless and eternally benign? This is why it is very, very difficult. Very difficult. And the Course says it. Many want to awaken, but few are going to achieve that. It is very difficult to awaken if your mind still sees victims. If the mind sees victims, you are still experiencing unhealed victim stuff. You've got to get that corrected. You've got to do your own inner healing. When you feel your sovereignty, you must see the sovereignty of every other being, including, as the example with Jody, the chickens that are suffering, because we have got to get clear that everything is a sovereign, holy, powerful being, because God cannot create anything that's not powerful. So either people are, or anything, any being is not powerful, or it is powerful. The Course asks us to be very clear of what is the truth. So when you look at, and listen, this was challenging for me. When I began to move through my journey, and you guys know the story with Spencer when he was doing drugs, and I was hearing a voice telling me, do not worry about if he dies, that his body, he might drop his body, but his soul is eternal forever. You need to focus on his eternalness. If I did not focus on his sovereignty, I would have treated him like a victim, like I knew better for him. And I would have treated my son like some kind of an idiot that couldn't think for himself, and his mother knew best, or his father knew best. When I began to treat him as a sovereign being, I began to cultivate a relationship with him, soul to soul, that began to have conversations with him. Like, why are you doing drugs? What's going on with you? I began to become more interested in really what he was experiencing than me attempting to let him know I didn't like his behavior because I couldn't handle it. Well, what was that saying about me? That I was weak. I can't handle your behavior. I can't handle if you die. I can't handle if you get yourself in trouble and have to go to the police. I was saying, I am weak. But when I began to listen to that voice that was guiding me to deal with him in a very different, unconventional way, it was about, tell me about your power, your strength. Why are you choosing this? What are you believing that has you do these things? Now, two sovereign beings looking at each other, now that he's no longer responsible for my happiness or my suffering, now we can enter into a conversation of two sovereign beings talking about what is it that we're experiencing and why is this happening? And we could look at the beliefs that we each had. We could look at the conditioning that we each received. We could look at what was happening in a very objective way that allowed us to pull apart all of the conditioning that brought us to that moment in time where we both had a choice to act as sovereign beings that are choosing, in his case, to do drugs, and me, in my case, choosing to not be a controlling parent and give up that way that I have been conditioned to believe that I was supposed to be as a parent, so I could do parenting the right way. When those labels were removed, what was left were two people, two holy beings sharing really what was going on in our hearts. We could share from that place. I could say, honey, I don't want to experience bearing a son. I really don't want to do that. That would be so sad. I would hate to lose you, but you're a sovereign being. If that's what you want to do, I want you to know that I don't want you to carry guilt of you thinking those thoughts, because I want to see you as a powerful being that gets to choose your own reality. And from that place, he was being heard. He had an opportunity to now, instead of worrying that mom is going to be sad for the rest of her life if he kills himself, he could talk about, well, why did he want to kill himself? Why would he feel so low? Then he began to share, well, mom, I just feel so much pressure. I can't keep up with what the schools expect of me. I don't want to have this kind of job. I don't want to have to do that. I'd rather do this. He was able to share what was in his heart. Now, two people really got to know what was going on, because instead of what the ego does, which is controlling one another, we were able to be curious about what was going on inside each other. And that's how we discover the conditioning that brings us to the places that create our suffering. God did not create us to suffer. Suffering is an option that we get to experience. Excuse me a second, let me drink some water. So suffering is an experience that we can choose in the 3D world, but the 3D world does not have to be experienced through suffering. But it is the suffering that is causing us to want to wake up. It is the suffering that is activating as the catalyst that is helping us see how deluded we are, how desensitized we are. And one of the most difficult things about awakening is going to face the fact that we have willingly, by choosing to incarnate, participated in becoming desensitized, participated in coming into this world and allowing our power to be basically hid from us in ways that now we have to claim it. And we have to claim our power by looking at what we don't like. You know, this is the teachings of Abraham. Everything is contrast. Through contrast, we see what we don't like and we see what we do like. And through understanding that we are powerful is that we begin to recognize that nothing needs pardon. That's what the Course is telling us right here in this particular segment. You cannot believe that you have the right to pardon anybody, because if you do, that makes you the judge. If you're judging between right and wrong. That is not pardon. That is egoic deciding for ourselves who is right and who is wrong. The way that we experience the true love of God is to realize that everybody is powerful, and to, from that place, call everybody into their power, to assist in the reminding everybody that what we're forgiving is because we forgot. We forgot how powerful we are. We forgot how sovereign and loving we can be. The next paragraph says, paragraph number 3, the major difficulty that you find in genuine forgiveness on your part is that you still believe that you must forgive the truth and not illusions. We really believe that it is true that the chickens are suffering from just the egoic perspective, and we're forgiving the suffering of the chicken. The Course doesn't want you to forgive the suffering of the chicken. The Course wants you to forgive that you forgot that those chickens are powerful, sovereign beings. That's the correction in our mind. So now we are going to assist the chickens because they're sovereign, not because they're victims. That is where we are going to assist in the freedom of every being, because as it is written in the Constitution, in our founding documents, it is written in the Course in Miracles, we are endowed by our Creator with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We are allowed to do that by design. It is our birthright. So we are not feeling sorry for somebody who is being oppressed. We are calling forth their sovereignty, and their sovereign self does not deserve that, because their sovereign self, if they want freedom, are endowed with that. Do you see how different that is? And this is not a typical conversation that most people can have, by the way. So I'm really grateful that you guys are willing to listen to a very radical perspective. But we have to want to assist everybody in having their freedom, because that's how God created them. Not because they're a victim, but because they're a sovereign being and deserve that. Yeah.
Can I make a comment or question?
Sure.
So, having a 19-year-old that I shared about yesterday that wants to is in the blame. If you look at the chart and the density, she's in the blame stage, right? So here and there. So based on this lesson, I don't need to forgive anything. I don't need to forgive her for throwing a dagger. I just need to look at her and say, well, here's where she is on the chart. She's in a blame. She's moving up in her consciousness or maybe going down. I don't know. That's none of my business. But I need to just forgive myself for forgetting how powerful she is.
Exactly. And you treat her as a powerful being. And when she is, throwing her daggers at you, you say, honey, that's perfectly okay. No matter what you say to me, I'm not going to use that to judge you with. You are experiencing what you're experiencing. And today, instead of being the mom that a week ago or a month ago or a year ago or 10 years ago would have reacted, today, I accept that you are where you are and you're feeling what you're feeling. And I'm not going to try to correct it because that would be for me to judge you like I know better for you. Instead, your behavior is not what I want to be around. I don't want to sit here and be judged that way. So, but I'm not going to tell you not to be judging. So you stay here, think what you think, and I'm going to go somewhere else and do what I want to do. So you can advocate for you. But what we have to understand is that we do not have the right to see somebody as if we become the bully, the decider of what they're doing wrong. We are equal brothers and sisters. And that's what this world needs more than anything, is that we remind each other that we all deserve the exact same thing because we were all endowed with the exact same liberty, the exact same freedom, the exact same ability to choose whatever it is that we want to do. And you will be a teacher to her through your example of not reacting, because she has seen you reacting. Now, if you're responding and you are saying, okay, you can think whatever you want to think. Now she's going to go through a bit of cognitive dissonance. Wait a second, my mom used to always react, and now she's responding. In her own mind, she now gets to see, well, do I like mom better when she responds? Well, for a while she won't, because her ego wants you to react so it can go into its justification of what a terrible mom you are. But inside of you responding, now her mind is going, wait a second, there's something that feels good about mom not talking to me in a bad way or judging me or yelling at me. It causes an opportunity internally for looking for another way. And that's why it's so important that when we understand that we're all equal, we begin to treat each other that way, because that is how shift is going to come into the world. Is we're going to see different ways of being, and we're going to like it better when people treat us. Now, not at the beginning, because the ego is expecting a certain reaction, but when we begin to respond consistently, we're creating just a whole nother opportunity for us to be together.
Laina,
yes.
I wanted to share something. It reminds me of an experience I had a number of years ago. I had a young man that came up to me. I was sitting in Holy Grounds having a cup of coffee, and he came up to me and says, "You probably don't remember me, but I used to come to all your workshops and your weekends and things like that." And he said, "I haven't seen you in years, but I just wanted you to know that for a long, long time, I really didn't like you. I didn't like the way you looked. I didn't like the way you talked. I didn't like anything about you, but I did like your programs, but I just didn't like you personally." And he said, "I just got back from a weekend program on forgiveness, and I feel so good now. And it's so great that I see you have the opportunity." And he says, "I want you to know that I know that you were just being who you were. That's all you were doing. And I forgive you. You couldn't be anything other than who you were." I just stood back for a second. I didn't react to it. I almost did. I didn't react to it because he was basically saying he became aware that I couldn't help but he was still judging me. In other words, it was a different situation. He became aware. He thought he became aware, seeing me differently, but I couldn't help being who I was. And I think that's, I mean, the statements that you just made in the last 10 minutes are critical. I'm going to go back and definitely listen to those again about the sovereignty part, because boy, so I have to recognize the sovereignty, not just in people that I see that I want to help, but people that I see that I'm totally not aligned with. I have to recognize the sovereignty in them Then I can choose to act based on what I need to do. But if I don't go through that step, and Jody, what I'm thinking you're doing is you're creating a pattern interrupt when you do that. In other words, if you do the same thing over and over again, you expect different results, you're insane. Well, by you choosing a different response to what's going on, then all of a sudden you didn't have to do anything. All you did is act as a pattern interrupt, and now they can take that gift that you just gave them. They're experiencing a new paradigm. That's a pattern interrupts. It's going to allow them the chance to see things different without you telling them how they should see things different. They're going to explore that on themselves because, again, cognitive dissonance, it's got to be resolved someplace, and let it be within them instead of us guiding them into what we want them to see. Just be who you are yourself, and cause that pattern interrupt. Thanks.
Absolutely. And right now, the world is in a massive opportunity for big pattern interrupt. The world is so deluded into believing that there are authorities that have power over us. And how else could we really come to a place of awakening except for something as massive as this virus thing? And the Course tells us everything that the ego can use for destruction, the Holy Spirit can use for salvation. So where this virus, the ego could use to hurt people, to control people, to make money off of people, to segregate people, to do whatever it is that the ego wants to do, the Holy Spirit is using it by those who are willing, and this is the key, those who are willing to see things differently and begin to, instead of from fear, love themselves enough, because it requires self-love to feel sovereign enough to question, to be curious and question what you are told comes from a place inside that is in alignment with your soul. Your deservability for something else moves you out of being a sheep that gets taken, or a chicken that gets taken to the slaughter. So there is an opportunity for pattern interrupt, and it is happening all over the place. There are thousands of doctors, of scientists, of attorneys, of people in the media, alternative media, that are the voice for the Holy Spirit, that are saying something doesn't add up here. So not only do we have to move out of this idea that authorities have power over us, we have got to recognize that we have an internal authority. And the big shift that is coming is going to be a massive clash between those who want to be controlled, victims and bullies, that victims that want to be controlled, that want to get their sovereignty from external sources, and those who are claiming their own internal sovereignty. Big pattern interrupt. That is what is happening, because we have all been conditioned into believing that there is, somebody else is the boss of us. So let me finish this paragraph, sentence number 2 in paragraph 3. I'm going to read the first sentence just so that we're all on the same page here. So the major difficulty that you find in genuine forgiveness on your part in the 3D world, ego forgiveness, is that you still believe that you must forgive the truth and not illusions. We think it's true that somebody hurt us and they have power over us. That's an illusion. Nobody can hurt your essence. Yes, we're not talking about physical. We're not talking about form. We're talking about content. Nobody can hurt your sovereignty. Not possible. That was granted to us by God. So it's the illusion that we have to recognize that we are here in the process of forgiving. We're forgiving the illusion that somebody has power over us. You conceive of pardon as a vain attempt to look past what is there, to overlook the truth, in an unfounded effort to deceive yourself by making an illusion true. I'll come back to that in a second. This twisted viewpoint but reflects the hold that the idea of sin retains as yet upon your mind as you regard yourself. All of those words boil down to this. Deep down inside, we do not accept how magnificent we are. Deep down inside, we still believe that we are a sinner of some sort. The word sin means that we are not perfect, that we've missed the mark, that there's something off with us, and therefore we do need to have somebody else tell us what to do. The big awakening that is happening in this world is that because we have not valued ourselves as God values us, because we've been taught, number one, God's outside of us. We don't believe we have that level of power inside of us. Religion has been used to hijack our minds and make us think that we're sinners, that there's something wrong with us. The government has made it very clear that they have the power to decide what happens to us. We have totally forgotten that they're here to manage the business of the people. They're not here to tell the people who, what we can and cannot do. They're here to manage what we want them to manage for us. The schooling system has completely dumbed us down. The family system in many ways has been decimated. People, parents are overworked, they're overstressed, they are overburdened financially and so in such incredible debt. The entertainment industry keeps our minds filled with so much nonsense, desensitizing us even more. The foods that we eat are not healthy. The air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the planet that we walk on. So many things have been basically, I'm going to say hijacked. That does not mean that we are not sovereign. That just means that we are unaware of how sovereign we are. God created each and every one of us powerful enough to choose to have this incarnation. We need to align with that powerful part of ourselves that chose to come into this shit show and recognize it was a choice. When you claim that you chose to be here, you will be in a position of realizing you don't need to pardon your mistakes or anybody else's mistakes. What we're pardoning is that we fell asleep and forgot how powerful we are. When we remember how powerful we are and that love is what is natural, of course, love is what heals. Of course, the light is then returned into the darkness. If we don't see people as powerful, we are projecting our own victimhood or our own bulliness. That means that is something that is still unhealed inside of us. It is something that we haven't acknowledged that is still active. The forgiveness is forgiving ourselves for having forgotten how powerful we are, that we let ourselves in this incarnation, and all past incarnations, by the way. But each incarnation, you have to look at it as opportunities to either descend on the chart or to ascend on the chart. So as we acknowledge how powerful we are, we really begin to liberate humanity, because it is our light that we have to connect with. It is our light that will allow us to see clearly what is happening. Everybody's playing a role. Everybody has fallen into a role because it's what they have chosen from a pre-physical state of beingness, consciousness, to become one that in this incarnation plays the role for those of us to play whatever role we're here to play on the journey to awakening. And we must see each other as powerful. Just as an actor who is playing the role of murderer to an actor who is playing the role of the one who got murdered, they play the role, but in their minds, they're not thinking, oh, you horrible person who shot me. Now I'll never be able to talk to you because you shot me on stage. No, that's what they were doing. They're acknowledging, wow, you're an awesome actor that you acted being dead so powerfully. And you were such an awesome actor that you acted, murdering me in such an amazing way. We have got to see each other as powerful sovereign beings, because if we don't, we're coming from our ego. And to come from our ego is to keep us doing the same repetitive processes, doing the same thing of seeing others as more powerful than we are, or that we are more powerful than they are. If we all knew how powerful we are, we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in. We're in the mess that we're in because some gave up their power and some were willing to take the power of those who are willing to give it up. Stop seeing people as victims. But you'll only be able to do that because you have come inside and you are acknowledging how powerful you and everybody is that is playing inside of this perceived experience of separation. When you unite head and heart inside, that means your mind is clear, that you don't have to believe a thought that you have just because it's in your head. Doesn't mean it's true. You've got to be comfortable acknowledging you're not right. As a matter of fact, we've got to be comfortable, as the Course wants us to say, we don't know what anything is for. Our mind is trained into knowing very little. We need to open up and access that which knows everything. And it will tell us what we need to know when we need to know it. God is not attempting to teach me about the sixth dimension. I can barely learning about the fifth so that I can act the way I need to act in the fourth. There is way more about what is possible that we just don't need to know right now. Today, what we do need to know is that we are the magnificent children of a creator that created all of us equal, created each and every one of us to experience life fully. Anybody on this planet attempting to take the life of anybody is clearly deluded, and that is a call for love. It's a call for correction. It is a call for us to say that is not okay for anybody. It's not okay for anybody. But if the ones that are participating in that want to keep doing it, you leave them alone. It is none of our business to wake up anybody who does not want to be awoken. But there are plenty who are calling for assistance. It is a call for love. Help your sovereign brothers reclaim their sovereignty, experience it in this 3D world, because that is what love does. Frees all beings to experience life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And nobody who is suffering is happy suffering when they're asking for help. And we know who's asking for help. And it starts with us. Thank you so much for being part of this. Next week, we will continue. I'll be back in Atlanta, and we can pick up and go through this lesson, because the forgiveness exercise in that lesson is beautiful. It is powerful, and we're nowhere near that part. We'll have to continue the conversation. But now I want to check with you. Any nuggets of wisdom that you picked up from this session, I would love for you to unmute yourself and please share it so that each and every one of us can see what the other learned and might spark something in us that maybe we might have lost. Yes, Christo.
I enjoyed that metaphor, or for me it was a metaphor, what Jody shared about the chicken, because in a sense I was a chicken many years ago. In 1960, I had a spinal operation, and I was down for about 5 months with cast around. Yeah, I had to look up. I had a mirror that was my world, was a mirror, upside down world, and it was my final year at school that I was missing, and I had family friends come to visit me. And the sadness in their face and their sympathies and their feeling of what they perceived I was going through. Now, here's the rub. I was having a ball. I had my operation. The 2-3 days were hell. But I was in my 3rd or 4th week, and people would come and visit me with their sympathies and that. And I was reading, I was missing school, I was on a new adventure. I was just exploring a whole new universe, which was different to being an active gymnast, being a surfer. I was confined to my world, which is a new world. And when I reflected back on that, and I remember seeing the looks on their faces, I realized in reflection that they had no idea what I was going through. They have no idea. They were seeing something that was part of their world. It certainly wasn't my world that I was looking at when I saw them come to visit me and share what they shared with me. Not to take away that they came to visit me, but just in terms of this session, I realized that you just don't know what someone else is really, really going through unless you feel into it. You make the connections that allow you to have some remnants of that experience. So, and as it came out later on, I wouldn't have been a chiropractor if I hadn't had that operation. It was like a preordained experience that totally unfolded my whole world. So it was a great experience for me, and not the same experience that many other people had of me.
That is so beautiful. Thank you for that share. And, you know, anybody who is afraid right now, anybody who's operating in fear, they don't know how powerful they are. They really don't. And what could be a better gift than for somebody to acknowledge their power? Somebody to acknowledge, yes, you'll get through this. You're going to be fine. What are you learning? What are you discovering? What are you experiencing? But we're not taught to ask those questions. We're taught to feel sorry for people, because if we feel sorry for others, we perpetuate that victimization that we have been indoctrinated into believing about ourselves, that we are less than, that we're not capable, that we can't handle this thing. So thank you for sharing that. Yes. Everybody unmute yourselves and please just share any nuggets. Kathy, Angela, Patricia, Lorelei, Laina, what nuggets did you pick up from today's conversation? Unmute yourselves, please, because everybody's...
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Hey, Laina, it's Kathy. Hey, that was an awesome session. Thank you. Christo, great share. Jody, amazing question. And Vern, I cut out for part of that, but yeah, it was great to be on live. Thank you for that.
So what are you taking that you are going to from this and shift in your own life because of this conversation?
It's just so much more perspective on when we see that we don't have to become part of what we see, right? We get to hold on, give everyone credit for being the sovereign being that they are, and we just keep doing us and holding the light.
Yeah, give people credit. They are where they are for a reason. Yeah. And it's so important that we begin to see them as powerful. We have got to get out of this feeling bad for anybody, because what is coming is that we all learn from consequences. That's what the 3D world is. And there are a lot of people, I'm going to say billions of people, who are going to learn from consequences, and they're going to be coming fast and furious. So we can't go into a place of, oh, consequences are bad. No, consequences are good. They're a mirror of what was in our consciousness expressed out as a consequence. And when we see that as, oh, that's the result of the choice. All right, now, if I don't like that consequence, I can choose differently. But we need to have people feel good about receiving feedback and not feeling bad and going into victimhood. So thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Totally. Who else?
So for me, it's just to really work on allowing and accepting for where people are and where everything is, and not judging and projecting my ideas of what I think somebody should be doing for their best interest. So it's really embracing that and practicing that more. It's such a relief to do that. I feel freer and lighter just doing that. So I'm going to continue that process.
That's beautiful. And take it a step further is to observe them as powerful, and then look at where internally we're attempting to control other people's behaviors because we're afraid. You know, I need you to do it this way so that I get to be okay. We've got to learn to be okay no matter what other people do.
That's true. And you think it's about them, but it's really about you. Because I'm like, I can see what would be the best thing for that person if they would just do whatever, you know?
Yeah.
So,
but usually, Laina, the reason we think we know what's best for the other person, it's always a selfish thing. If you do it this way, then I get to be okay. If you would only stop doing drugs, it's better for you, then I get to be okay. And I needed to learn how to be okay regardless of what my son was doing. So anytime that we need something to change, to be other than how it is, come inside and see what part of you can't handle what is. What part of you feels that you can't be sovereign in the midst of whatever is happening? If you can free yourself in the midst of something that you don't like, well, that's freedom. Then you'll be free in the midst of everything you do like. So very cool. Thank you so much for that. Anybody else? Let's take one more and then we'll wrap it up. No, nobody else? Well, thank you all. Yeah.
Well,
hey, Kat.
Hi. It is the world is such an interesting place. Yesterday, I went into a drawer in my room I don't normally go into, and this book called Radical Forgiveness by Colin Tippett. It just stepped out. It just like, okay, I meant to pick this back up. And what I did with it is I took it to my daughter. and I'm realizing that I so want my daughter to forgive in a situation that's very, very difficult for her. But it's about me. I'm getting from this is that for me to be happy, I need her to resolve this conflict with another member of the family. However, I don't believe in accidents. So I think I was meant to share that with her. And I told her I definitely want it back because I want to reread it myself. But it's a coincidence. It's so strange that you brought that book up that I just picked up. The world, it works in mysterious ways. But I can see that I'm manipulating her or trying to manipulate her into forgiving. And yeah. I need to let her just forgive when she's ready or no.
Exactly. And what if she is not, ready to forgive because part of her plan was to not forgive so that you would get your lesson to quit needing others to forgive before you do your own forgiveness work, which is to forgive yourself for having forgotten that everybody is sovereign and on their own journey, and it's none of your business what other people do. When they wake up, when they don't, that it is your work to free yourself and find your sovereignty, then you become an example for others. Beautiful. I love it.
Yeah. It's just strange.
It is strange because it twists our way of thinking. What if everything is, what if everyone is powerful? That's what we want people to remember, how powerful then the victim bully story ends when we remember our power.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being a conscious mama. All right, everybody, I love you all, and I will see you guys next week. How fun. I'll get this uploaded and put it into our chat group. Thank you all so much for your willingness to see things differently.
Thank you. Love you. Love you all.
Love you too.
Thank you, Laina. Love you. Love you guys.
Thank you.
Bye,
Love you.
everybody.
Happy grandma.
Bye. Bye.